Hey everyone, welcome to Decipher the Media. On this episode, we have Alex Cassun, who is a filmmaker who works in Pittsburgh. He has been on many projects, worked in the industry for many years. His experience in the field includes work as a producer, a writer, an assistant director, and work in the art department. It is a very informative conversation. We sat down and talked a lot about his experiences, what it's like to make creative decisions in the various roles in filmmaking, and how to develop a project from beginning to end and get it out there for the world to see, developing it with your own voice in mind, and developing for the goal of ultimately deciding what audience you have in mind for a film. So a very interesting conversation, very educational conversation. I was very happy to have him on to talk film and to really just learn a lot from him. So, as I said, this is Alex Cassun, and enjoy the latest episode of the Decipher the Media Podcast. Cool. Yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Alex Cassun. I'm here with Indieground Films.
Cool. And what are you here for today? Are you here to promote any projects?
No, mostly just kind of talk and meet other filmmakers and meet people who do things in town. I do always have projects on the run, so I'll probably mention a couple as we go.
All right, cool. Yeah. What have you been working on like recently, or actually, what do you do like particularly on film sets?
I've gotten to the point in my life that I just want to make movies with friends, and it has gotten to be that if anybody needs me as an AD, they'll give me a call. I prefer producing.
Okay.
So if you want me as a producer, I think try to get me on as early as possible into your project.
Cool.
And then I direct my own things. I do a lot of art department as well.
Yeah. How did you get started? Like, what area did you get started in?
Well, when I always knew I wanted to be a writer and director, and my first jobs were actually in camera department on reality TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
And just immediately I hated it, and I wasn't going to go anywhere with it. Not just the medium of reality TV, but
Yeah.
I'm not a tech person at all. I'm weirdly left-handed, can't over under cables. I just knew I wasn't going to make it very far in camera.
Yeah.
But then the same company that hired me for those first couple jobs put me in the art department, and I loved that.
Cool.
And then I spent a while kind of jumping between being I was living in LA, and I spent about 10 years jumping in between being a production designer on low budget, kind of less than $1 million sci-fi action-y films, and then doing post-production work for reality TV.
Oh, that's really cool. What was the industry like so this was like 10 years ago you were in LA, or?
It was 10 years ago that I left LA.
10 years ago you left LA.
Yeah.
When did you start in LA, would you say?
I moved to Southern California I'm going to date myself a little bit, but in 99.
Okay.
And then kind of, I think my first job, specifically like TV related job, was in 2003, maybe.
Okay, cool.
And then I think 2005 is when I went to LA specifically. So I kind of jumped around to a few different cities outside LA for a while.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I did around Pittsburgh until I finally was dead center in it.
Yeah.
What was the industry like back then? Like, was it different than it is now?
I'm not the right guy to ask. I don't really know what it is now.
Okay.
So it's hard for me to place it.
Well, I mean, compared to like how you do things now here, I guess I should say.
Well, I think that there's been a huge kind of seismic change in terms of the affordability of equipment, the the way people watch movies and watch TV. So there's just so much more content out there, and it's so much easier to make content. And I mean, don't ask me how you get funded to get it or get anybody on your side to watch things. But in terms of, in theory, how it's supposed to work, you can make things for really cheap now, and there's avenues to view them that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like when I was first making films, nobody made short films. Like short films were not a thing.
Yeah.
And I never thought in terms of short films. Like my features are generally, I have an idea, I've got interesting characters in my head, and I have a goal to get to after 90 minutes. And at that 90 minutes, I'll hit my mark. But I couldn't do a 5-minute short film to save my life. I mean, I made one official short film. Everything else has been like 48-hour projects to kind of practice that. But YouTube didn't exist. Vimeo didn't exist.
That's true. So it's like hard to sort of promote a short film and with the avenues back then, basically.
Yeah, and it didn't make any sense cost-wise to do it. So anybody who was making a short film was doing it as a promo for a feature that they wanted to get funding for. And nobody would sit and watch a 15-minute short film, let alone like a 30-minute short film, which people love to make nowadays. I don't really understand.
Were they still using film at that point? Like, was film still a big thing? Yeah,
it was still a big thing. Well, yes, but it was right on the cusp of like, what was it, like the Panasonic DVX 100 or whatever it was, and like that kind of changed everything.
Yeah, so like the game changer for like the digital era.
Yeah, so I think that was probably like 2004, 2005. So that was right as I was getting serious about doing it as an actual job or working in an actual industry. Yeah,
so you were right when that transition was happening.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that was probably kind of a bit of a learning curve.
Well, when I did go to school for a bit, kind of cashed out early and packed up, and I grew up in Utah and went to school for a year, but they didn't have a film course there, so I took some like journalism course and did a bunch of like sports and event filming and editing courses, which was a lot of fun. But we were editing on film, which was great. That was a lot of fun. But then that was basically the only thing I did on film. After that, I think I moved to London and I did a short film out there that I was an AD on that was shot on 16 millimeter, which was a ton of fun. But that's, you're doing it for fun now rather than that's the way you make films.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely it seems like I haven't done it myself, but it seems like it'd be a tougher process because there's just not so much room for error.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of room for error. That's kind of my style.
Yeah. So when that revolution kind of happened, that was probably, something that really helped you out there.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't making a whole lot of my own personal projects before.
Oh, true, yeah.
But yeah, there's I got sent a link the other day to, I can't remember the name of the competition, Straight 8, I think it's called.
Okay.
Straight. It's 8 millimeter film competition.
Oh yeah. I just got one I think I got that sent from Kevin.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm definitely down. I think it sounds fun. I've got some ideas in my head on shorts to do, but it's just really tricky. I don't really write short films.
I talked to a guy at a cafe not too long ago who he was just carrying around a Super 8 camera. And he was just like telling me all the great projects that he's done with it, and then he highly recommends, if I've never shot on like Super 8 film before, that I should do it. And so
I think their tricky thing, and I really like challenges, which is one of the reasons I kind of gravitate towards 48-hour film festivals and things. But the challenge with this particular competition is that you have one roll of film, you have about 3 minutes and 10 seconds, and you have to send in the undeveloped project to them. They develop it on their end, so you can send a separate like audio file,
right?
But you can't sync them up yourself,
right? So
they screen them and they're synced for the first time ever. So it's a really interesting kind of setup, and I like that as a challenge, and trying to figure out ways on how do you go and film or shoot a movie in a way that you're not going to actually like hear the audio to it properly. And I mean, like, I would totally jump on board this if I had an idea that worked for me.
Right.
But I haven't been able to figure anything out.
What is how does your ideas, like, as a producer, or how do they affect, or how does the tools you have available to you affect how you think of it as like when you're producing a film?
That's a very good question. Well, I generally, so producing is one of two things for me. Either somebody comes up to me and they have an idea, or they have a script, or they're halfway done in, production, and they need help and whatnot. At that point, it's kind of out of my hands. I'm like, all right, well, what are you trying to accomplish, and how can we make this work?
Yeah.
And then the other side is, I stopped calling myself a writer a long time ago. I'm not the type of person that can redraft or come at a scene from a different angle, and like once it's kind of locked in my head, it's stuck there.
Yeah.
So I stopped calling myself a writer, and now I focus more on quote unquote story development.
Okay.
And whether I get anything actually written or not is different. But I don't know how. I don't think of technology in terms of I guess I don't think about technology while I'm writing or trying to develop a story.
Yeah.
But in terms of producing, I really like to. I guess going back a little bit, I did a couple feature films. So earlier this year, or I guess 2019, since we're in 2020 now, my feature film called The Buskers and Lou was released, and we filmed that. I left LA, kind of moved around for a little bit, and ended up in Portland, Oregon, which is where I thought I was going to stay forever until I got married to a Brit and kind of dragged out of the country, which it was great experience, loved it.
Yeah.
But like it took me forever to finish the film, so I got back to Pittsburgh, got settled in, found a network of people to help me finish it off.
Right.
It was non-scripted. It was just running around Portland trying to have fun with some people and make a movie.
Oh, okay.
And just kind of enjoy it, the process of making a film.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So if you give me a challenge like that, I think that kind of spurs creativity. So if you tell me what the boundaries are of a project, that's where I can work really well.
Okay.
Whereas if you just like give me a piece of paper and say, all right, well, let's go make a movie.
Yeah, oftentimes constraints can really help you like generate ideas a lot better than if you just have a wide open, like say, metaphorical space to work with where there's really no limitations at all. And you have whatever you can to work with it. It's hard because it's just, then nobody can really decide on anything based on that sort of.
Yeah, I feel like I don't have a good enough imagination to just stare at a piece of paper and come up with a whole new world or a whole new like that's just, I don't care.
Yeah.
Or that's not the way my brain works. And if I wanted to do that, I'd probably just be a novelist rather than a screenwriter.
Right.
So
yeah, world building is definitely tough.
Yeah. I mean, I do enjoy the process of world building. I just don't like the idea of kind of sitting down and like come up with an entire new, like, give me something to work with. Like, come at me and say like, I'm an actor and I want to work with you. Let's develop a character around like my strengths or whatever. I'm like, I can work with that.
Yeah.
But if you just said, okay, pitch me a story, I'm just like, I don't know. I've got millions. I don't know what to do. Options paralysis. Like, I just want to sit and do nothing.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, I have to know something about what you want or,
or what are we going to do with it? Or, one of the big questions, like, it took me a long time to learn this, but you have to think about your audience from day one. Like, don't wait until you've got a film in the can and then like go, okay, well now what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
So if you know that you want your film to be film festival, like a festival project, then you kind of create it in one way. If you know you want it to be a YouTube project, you create it a different way. And it's probably like slight variations on the thing, but it makes you, knowing what your end goal is going to inform all the decisions you make to get to that end goal.
Right.
So, for example, I did a short film called Closure that I just got done saying I don't do short films, but I've literally done one short film in like 15 years. And that is I had an idea. I was watching a TV show called The Fall with Gillian Anderson.
Okay.
And, really good show. She's, in Ireland. She's a cop kind of following a serial killer. And there was just something about the situation of the character that struck me as a really good idea for a short film.
Oh, yeah.
Completely separate from, like, I try not to steal too much, but, the setup of this cop talking to this person in this setting. So I wrote the short film. It was like 5 minutes long. We wanted to keep it as short as we can get it. Went out and filmed on the weekend. But all that entire time, I just wanted to get it out to a few, like, horror film festivals, make it, a fun little gory thriller.
Yeah.
And that's it. I knew I didn't really, like, I don't know what I want to do with it afterwards. I'm going to put it up on YouTube, I guess, and and have it out there. But it was just intended to get into a couple of horror film festivals, and it's done its job. I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we actually just got done with one of my feature films in like a film circuit not too long ago, and now they're putting it up on streaming, which is pretty cool.
What one's that?
Body Farm.
Oh, is that yours?
Yeah, I was the DP on it. It's not really mine.
Gotcha. I saw the big posters we came in, and
Yeah.
I've seen all sorts of press about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know who was actually like the creatives involved with it. So,
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so that was like probably the biggest project I've worked on to date. But yeah, it was interesting to see it kind of go through all the the film circuits and all that. So I wasn't really involved with it too much like after the fact, but it was still cool to kind of follow it on social media and stuff. How much like say from a producer's perspective, while we're on the subject, would you say you get involved with like, you know, getting the film promoted or getting it out there, or?
That is a good question. So I've always wanted to be a director, but I didn't know I wanted to be a producer until I started producing.
Okay.
But I didn't do film school. I moved around a lot, so every time I moved to a new city, I'm kind of building a new network of people, and you kind of meet people that you see eye to eye on creatively, or you see eye to eye on the type of films you love and things like that. And I have kind of I don't feel I'm much of a movie snob, but I do feel like I have my particular things I gravitate towards, and there's certain things that kind of turn me off. So I think I have a hard time meeting people that want me to produce for them.
Okay.
And I find that the more I produce, the more I kind of, as it should be, but the more I'm learning. And I've been going one, not deliberately on purpose, but like one step at a time. So I learned how, like, literally to get a film in the can. Like, it's done, we finished it. And then I had to learn how to actually like get it completed and delivered. And then now I want to get it to where I'm actually making money off it.
Right.
So like the idea of press is something that, and this goes back to something I was talking about earlier, is that you need to know what your end goal is from the get-go. So you should be thinking about press from day one. Like as soon as that script is, you know, in the hands of an AD and you're breaking it down, or it's in the hands of a production manager and you're getting things ready to move forward, you need to be thinking about press. You need to be thinking about poster design. How's your trailer going to look? What's the feel you're going for? And that's all stuff that I've gone through now, the trouble of making 2 feature films. And my next one, I'm like, well, now I'm going to approach it completely differently because of that. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that definitely helps out. What's been more of your focus lately? Has it been more producing or directing?
I think I'm a producer who directs every once in a while, or
Okay.
I'm a story guy who tries to figure out how to get them made.
Okay.
So right.
Yeah.
And I love directing. I love getting behind camera and getting out there and working with actors and thinking about colors and everything else, and how to tell your story. But I feel like there's a big chunk of me that directing is just a bridge between sitting alone in my room and writing and sitting alone in my room editing. I feel like production is just a bridge to get me to these things that I'm a bit more comfortable in.
Okay.
But the more I do it, the more I enjoy it. And 48s have been a lot of fun. We've had success with them. I've done like 3 of them in the last 2 years, and they've all been fun. I don't know if you can hear the cats in the background. Yeah. They're having fun.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But it's taught me a lot of, you know, interesting lessons about what works and what doesn't in a pinch, and when you have to like just make something happen. You know,
how does like your experience as a storyteller or director help you as a producer? Like, how do they translate between, you know, each side of that coin?
Well, I do find myself answering questions a lot where I'm like, well, my producer brain says this, but I understand what you're trying to get out of the scene, or what you want out of, you know, the script or whatever. But I think good filmmakers in town, especially, so I come from a very, very indie DIY background. Like, I love little $5,000 films.
Yeah.
Like, there's some memes going around on Facebook about watching people's like student films and what it's like, and I'm like, I love people's students film. Like those are like those are people out there just trying to make something happen.
Right, absolutely.
And so to me, if you can be honest about what your parameters are and like what you're trying to accomplish and whatnot, then you can make decisions that make that film better.
Right.
Where you're like, well, we can't have 20 background extras right now, or we can't have a horse in the scene. Like, we've got to come out. And that's natural producer brain, but I also feel like that's, like, it's important to be a storyteller when you're making these decisions.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I kind of gravitate towards, like, like, when I'm writing, I think about how do things, how will that translate to a shot on screen, or like how the shots will look in a scene, because I also do sort of a good bit of camera stuff as well. So it's kind of cool to kind of be in multiple areas of expertise, because then you kind of translate that knowledge from one place to the next to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some compartmentalizing that takes place as well, where I've gotten better at. So right now I'm kind of shopping around, or getting ready to shop around a pilot that I wrote that I'm a big fan of. I think I think it's a really interesting setup. I want to film it here in Pittsburgh, but it's not like the advice I've been given is like, just go out and find the money and shoot the pilot. I'm like, well, the whole story is about this community organizer has died, and there's a bit of mysterious circumstances behind his death. It's called The Wake. The whole story takes place at his funeral and the wake afterwards. We need to see a wide variety of characters, and it's important for them to be in the scene. So if this is being shopped around to like HBO or Netflix, hopefully at some point in time, they're going to want to just reshoot it anyway. So I don't see a reason to try to like cobble together enough money to hire professional actors in order to shoot this big pilot,
right?
Knowing that wouldn't ever be on anything. Like it just would be refunded, and they would want like Denzel Washington or whatever. Like they're not going to want like local actors if you're doing a big Netflix thing or HBO thing.
Right.
So trying to, I'm taking myself out of that as a director and producer at the moment, and just focusing on story, because I'm not going to have the funds to produce it, at least not right away. And
right.
So I'm trying not to like limit myself from a writing standpoint, because I don't have the ability to produce it. Whereas most things, like if I wrote another feature that's just like literally 3 friends in a cabin who show up to like the world's worst reunion, like 20 years after high school or whatever, and it's 3 people in a cabin, like I can go out and shoot that in a week for like $10,000. So it's nice to have that in my back pocket. But I was aware of I would probably be producing and directing this as I'm writing it, so I wrote it to kind of tailor towards my strengths.
Yeah. How much of a influence do you think that has when you shop around a project, like based on, well, I guess it has a lot of influence, but like,
well, I wouldn't write like I'm a sci-fi fan. I like sci-fi movies. I like action movies and like Marvel films. I would never write a comic booky style like MCU movie with the intention of self-producing, because it would just bomb. Like,
true.
I think Chronicle was a really good film that did that, but it was still, a decent sized budget for it, and it was written by somebody that people knew, so he was able to get the funding for it. Whereas if I'm doing it, it's just not going to go anywhere. It's going to look like somebody made it in their backyard. So.
Yeah, one of the first projects I did when I moved to Pittsburgh was this like sci-fi like series, and it was just like the guy who was producing it basically made all the props himself, and it was just like, it was so crazy and low budget looking, and we were shooting it on like a Canon T2i, and I was just like,
that's what I shot my feature with.
I'm just, it's just, I mean, they're good cameras, don't get me wrong, for what they are, but like but yeah, it's just like, I'm like, this project's probably not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like if you have a certain style or a certain flair to your work, low budget B movies can be successful to some degree.
True.
Not quite the type of movies I make, but like there's an audience out there. It's the same thing with like horror films. Like you can you can get away with a lot. Like you still have to be innovative and resourceful, but you can do low budget, and there's going to be audiences for it out there.
Yeah.
You know, not every genre is like that, and not every storyteller is like that. Like I know a lot of people who can sit in their basement and make really cool looking sci-fi effects and props and things like that, and they're going to look great on camera, but I don't have the ability to do that. So I definitely don't write them into my scripts. So
How do you think like badly, like just really low budget movies, like say, for example, I don't know, Birdemic or something like that. What do you think makes those like work so well where people just
I couldn't tell you. I've
like
never
really
seen it. It's
attached
not.
to
Yeah,
it?
and again, not trying to like be a film snob or anything like that.
Oh,
But, like
okay.
it's just not my.
Yeah, it's really a terrible movie. That's just it's so
Yeah.
bad that.
But I mean, was it designed to be bad to get an audience? And there's a lot of movies out there. I don't know if that one specifically is, but there's a lot of movies that are designed to be terrible because people love terrible movies.
That's true.
So
I do not
there's an
think
audience for
this
everything.
one was designed to be terrible. I think it was intentionally like they were trying, but
Well, my favorite quote, I try to live by this, is I might not like your painting, but I love that you paint. And that's kind of the way I approach
right.
other people's stuff. So I would help people make their movie, even if it's something I think is going to be absolute trash. If I trust the person, or if I think, they're going at it for the right reasons.
Right. It's just like it's so weird that certain things you wouldn't think would have that sort of appeal because they're so simply made. Like all of a sudden become so big.
Yeah.
That's just.
But yeah, I mean, the funny thing is like there's an audience for everything. If you can be like, if you're so bad you're good, there's gonna be an audience for it. Or if you're so unique, like there's a movie called Rubber, which is about a tire that goes on a killing spree, and like it's really fun. Like it's a really fun movie, but it's only really fun because it's really, really well produced.
Yeah,
So,
that's another horror low budget horror movie I saw not too long ago called Thanksgiving. That was just a turkey puppet going around like murdering people.
Yeah.
And it was just
there's an audience for it.
Yeah,
the
most
like
ridiculous thing ever.
Yeah, well, people like to be amused while they're watching movies, but yeah, my sensibilities are a bit more serious.
Yeah,
but
what do you say you aim to, like? Is there a certain audience you always aim for, or is it always like change up?
No, well, like I say, I haven't really thought. This goes into the press conversation and the marketability conversation, I guess, a little bit. Is that knowing who your audience is when you go into it helps you kind of play up one way or another towards that. Whereas my features have been things that I've made for myself or I made with my friends for our own personal reasons.
Right.
Where we didn't even think about who was going to watch this at the end. And the first one, no one's going to watch because the sound was so bad on it.
Oof.
Whereas the second one, it's out. You can go find it on Amazon and iTunes
cool.
and Google Play and all that.
Awesome.
So at least that was a success. But I didn't really think, other than we wanted to do festivals, I didn't think on actually who would want to watch this movie. Whereas I probably would have done a bit more marketing with like, millennial cyclists and hipsters and socialists and my kind of people.
Who do you think like they hit with, like after the fact? Like
I would love to know. So my conversation I had with the distribution company, there should have been a bit of a red flag. But we had an initial chat and it all sounded good, and it wasn't like there was a bunch of companies vying for my movie. There was a couple that were interested in it, and I went with this company, Random Media, because I had seen a couple films that they had distributed, and I liked those movies. So I'm like, okay, I can trust that. But then I had a conversation with the guy who runs the company, and he straight up told me, he's like, yeah, I watched your movie and I didn't get it, and I didn't want to say yes to it, but then my grandson talked me into it, and I'm like, okay, well, your grandson is great, and that's the audience that I'm going for. So yeah, it's a movie about people kind of on the outskirts who are trying to figure out how to live and work in this kind of unforgiving capitalist society that we live in. And it's this guy who made some mistakes. He was in jail for a while. He gets out of that, and he's trying to like get his first proper job and live in an apartment by himself for the first time in his life, and like get a cell phone for the first time in his life, and he just doesn't connect with it at all. and he figures it out more or less by the end with his friends. And
Cool.
yeah, so whoever would find that interesting, that you should go check it out.
Where would you find, like, most of your projects? Do you have those up on, like, your website, or?
Yeah, I just redid my website, and I just worked with, actually, I think he was your last guest, Ian Altenbaugh.
Yeah, I've had him on twice already, I think.
Cool. Yeah, I couldn't remember if he was your last one or a couple ones before that, but he just finished editing my demo reel. We knew it was going to be a pain in the ass. It was basically trying to find connective tissue between these two no-budget, low-production value improvised dramas and a handful of, like, really glossy genre shorts, and some of them are pretty gory. So, like, how do you connect that in a demo reel? And I think he did a really good job, but you can find all that at alexcassunfilms.com.
Cool.
Yeah, like I say, Buskers and Lou you can find on, most streaming places if you got Verizon, Fios, and Xfinity and all that.
Cool.
Well, the from a producer standpoint, I guess, with the most recent one, it's this pilot called The Wake. I'm terrible at remembering pitches and things, but I wrote a really good log line with it. But the general idea is The Fugitive meets The Wire, and it's just this kid gets out of jail for 24 hours to go to his best friend's funeral. Like, somebody's pulling the strings to get him out. Somebody gets killed, he goes on the run, and now he's trying to figure out what happened with his friend and also try to make sure he doesn't go to jail for something he didn't do. So, story-wise, I came up with the idea a long time ago. I had a massive, just absolutely massive amount of plot that I've got on notes and, like, napkins written everywhere I can find. But from a producer standpoint, I've had to really kind of rein it in and just focus on making the pilot as good as I can get it, rather than my writer instincts is to write the whole thing. I just want to story beat out the entire thing, and I want to get it all together and just have this massive amount of work that'll probably go nowhere or get changed quite a bit, and it'll all be a waste of time. But from a producer standpoint, it's I'm like, I now have a thing, and now how do I go and get that thing out there?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm working on now, is like figuring out how to get it out there.
Cool. Yeah, and I just thought of what I was going to ask you as you were, like, doing that. Because it sounds like there's maybe a bit of like a social influence on the type of movies that you do. How much of that, like, do you draw from, like, your experiences, or either as, like, a producer or a director or even a writer, any of those?
Probably quite a bit. I think I don't know if I can detach myself from my politics, and I think that comes up in my stories quite a bit. In terms of, like, are my films autobiographical? Not really. So my first movie that I made, or completed anyway, was this thing called Hurricane Emma, and I'd written a script. It was very meaningful to me, and it was about a truck driver, a hitchhiker, and a dog in an 18-wheel truck driving through the desert in the middle of the night, and the whole thing takes place over like 4 or 5 hours. I know how I'd want to shoot it. I know who I'd want to cast in it, and I wrote this 15 years ago now. But I wanted to throw the script out the window because I felt really strongly at the time, even with no, like, data, no backup, like no reason to kind of, like, know that this was true. But I just wanted to throw the script out and work with story beats and create characters and dialogue with the actors. And I had landed, like, somehow miraculously, I'd landed a line producer who liked the story and liked the script. And she got me some meetings, and I was 24, 25 years old and had no idea what meeting producers was meant to be or was meant to be like. And they all bombed pretty miserably. And the third one, like, he sat me down at, Franken Musso's or whatever it's called. It's in Tarantino's new movie.
Oh, okay.
It's a famous restaurant in LA where people just go and talk shop and things get made. And so I'm like, okay, this is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
He had just funded $1 million short, or like $1 million feature film that I was an art director on. And so that's how I kind of got connected with him. He sat down and he's like, well, what do you want? I'm like, I want $200,000 to just go out and shoot this myself, throw the script out the window, and just make the movie that I want to make. We want to submit it to Sundance. We want to kind of get it out in the world this way. And he's like, oh, that's that's cute. I'm like, he's like, here's what I want. Is I want to make it for $1 million. And I'm like, all right, cool. Now we're talking. And he's like, I want Tommy Lee Jones as a truck driver. And I'm like, okay. I was thinking like Bob Balaban, like some, like a little indie guy that people know. But
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, great. If we can get Tommy Lee Jones for $1 million feature, then great. We're doing something. And he's like, I want to cast my son as a hitchhiker. And I'm like, okay, well, your son's the right age. He's got to look like, like if we're throwing the script out the window, I can work with him. And he's just like, I want to write flashbacks and a love story, and like I want a friend of mine to direct it, and I want to give you like $5,000 for the script. And I'm like, I had to walk away. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I went home, and I was living with a bunch of people, and one of them was a really good actor, one of them was a cinematographer, wanted to get into cinematography. We had friends who were actors, and we got fed up. And I've never been a big fan of LA. My movies don't fit in there. My personality doesn't really fit in there. Yeah. And we're just like, fuck it, we're gonna go make a movie. Like a month later, we had finished Hurricane Emma. We had no script. Like we just took 4 actors, myself and my DP roommate, and a friend of ours who was kind of funding it. He gave us $1,200, and we're like, all right, let's go make a movie. Yeah. And we shot it like no script at all. We shot it in 4.5 days. 19 locations. I was working 22-hour days. Like, yeah, it was obnoxious, but it was such a great, like, creative moment. And I look back fondly on the movie. If the sound guy had shown up the day that we were going to leave, it would have been better, but he didn't. And so I'm, like, booming it, producing it, directing it, writing the story in my head as we're going. And it was just fun. And so from that, I did Buskers and Lou a couple years later, and that was a lot more structured, where we had written out more of a beat sheet, and I had some dialogue on paper. Spent the course of 3 months kind of just picking up a scene here and there, but it was mostly non-scripted. Okay. And in terms of it, to actually answer your question 10 minutes later, Hurricane Emma was drawn on experiences of mine, but it was not autobiographical, but I knew the locations we were filming in. I knew the kind of story of basically just somebody traveling home and reconnecting with friends and family. And then Buskers and Lou, like I was living out of my van in LA for a while, just traveling around. I kind of converted it so I can live out of it and drive around the country. And that we took that angle of the story. And then the job that he ended up getting, doing like this terrible inventory control job where he goes to different stores and like counts shit all day long. That is a true to life thing. But then everything else was just kind of made up. Yeah. It was fun.
That's cool. What would you say, like going back on like sort of like, the sort of influence or control that other people can have like on something that you're working on, how much, where do you meet in the middle for something like that?
Oh, great question. I used to feel like I fell very much on the auteur side of things. I was very much kind of David Fincher. Everything is super controlled. Yeah. You know exactly what you want, and you're not going to settle for anything less. When I was writing, I still love writing features and things that are like thrillers and suspenseful movies. I feel like you need more control in order to get what you want. Right. But what I've learned doing these 2 films that are basically just practice to get me to where I want, so I can direct this hitchhiker film one of these days. I love collaboration. I love it in a way that I never thought I was going to before, and just giving up control as a filmmaker was really weird, but now I'm super comfortable with it, and I'm totally happy just kind of sitting around the table and just letting the ideas come, and then your job as director, and again, this isn't for every single project, like, right? But for like if somebody came up to us and said, I've got $20,000 and I want you to go make a movie, I feel super, super comfortable saying, all right, well, I'm going to pull these creative folks who are on the same kind of wavelength. We're going to sit around, we're going to make a movie, and we're going to make it great, and we're going to make your money back, and, give us a month to do it. I feel like the only way to do that is by opening yourself up to allow other people's creative visions to kind of merge with your own. And then, you just finesse things, and you have to have the confidence and the kind of understanding on like what is a good idea that's going to help you and what is not. And I feel like that comes from experience and from the gut. You kind of just follow it.
What do you do like when you get into like a disagreement with someone and it's just like like how do you mediate a situation where it's just you can't change that person's mind about a certain idea?
Well, I guess two thoughts on that is one, if you can't change their mind, then you don't have a fully articulated concept yet.
Okay.
So if you can't discuss it, or you can't verbalize why it should be a certain way or the other way, then maybe take a break, take 5 minutes, and then come at it and talk it over again and see if that gap in time has allowed you to kind of rethink things.
Okay.
And then the other one is that even if you're being super, super collaborative and you're being very kind of open and it's everybody's creative, passions are being respected here, there should be a pecking order with things. And if you turn down people's ideas, you just don't do it in a dickish way. Like, you need to encourage. Mm-hmm. Like, I want like a PA on my set to be able to have the confidence of going like, what if you did this? And if I say no, or like, hey, sorry, we can't, like, just understand I'm not, like, just, I appreciate you putting your input and I don't want to like shut the door in your face, but like, I'm saying no because there's probably a good reason for it.
Right.
Whereas like if the DP and I are having a conversation on lighting or the way we want to frame something, in the end of the day, it should come down to me. But at the same time, if I recognize when somebody's got a better idea than mine. Like, the goal is making the best movie possible.
Right.
And so like, you have to trust everybody's experience, and you have to trust that they're coming from it from a particular point of view. But if you have something very strongly, or something in your mind that you feel very strongly about, there's a pecking order. So.
Okay. Going back on, like, you kind of touched on this a little bit ago. How does location kind of influence how something like a project you're working on gets created? Is there some sort of, like, based on the area that since you've been, a couple different places, has it really changed how you approach a project?
Not really, but it's funny, like this pilot, The Wake, I wrote that originally when I was living in London, and I'd always intended it to be, there's a lot of water symbolism and rust symbolism throughout the story, and I always wanted to just be in an unnamed Rust Belt city with a lot of hills, a lot of rivers, and like a cluster of like a downtown and some like rich areas and poor areas and a nice reservoir with a good view. And then I moved to Pittsburgh, and I'm like, holy shit, like, I didn't even like think, like, I never intended this to be Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh's absolutely perfect for it. The idea that there's $1 million views in the city. It doesn't, like, there's some neighborhoods that are super, super rough, and yet they've got like the most amazing views. Like, that kind of all feeds into this story. So had I written it, if I grew up in Pittsburgh and I wrote the story, it probably would be significantly different than me coming up with the story when I lived somewhere else, and then finding the characters that I like and finding how it all connects in my head, and then happening on the perfect city for it. Whereas if I wrote it about Pittsburgh growing up here, I probably would have written a bit more like a love story to Pittsburgh. Like, Pittsburgh is like, this is a story about Pittsburgh, which it's not. I don't want to mention the city at all. It's just, it needs to be kind of like an everyday, like just a town.
Yeah. See, I kind of think the same way when I'm writing, because I know a lot of people, they like to like really take pride in the city and like write it into their into their scripts or whatever, but I like to keep it ambiguous when I'm doing writing, because I feel like it, like, then more people can like kind of connect to it on a
well, there is
personal
something
level.
to be said about like what do they say, specificity, I can't even speak, but like, the more specific you get, the more universal it is, which is an interesting concept.
Oh, really?
But I mean, it's just something people say.
Okay.
But whether or not it's true is up for debate, I guess. But so, for example, I feel like the city within my story has its own personality. It's really, there's a lot of changes going on. There's a lot of issues with gentrification and all these things that are specific to my story. But it just so happens that a city like Pittsburgh is going through similar issues.
Right.
I guess I wouldn't have wanted the personality of Pittsburgh to overshadow the personality of this nameless city that I wrote in my pilot. Whereas if I had grown up here my entire life, I probably would have informed it in a completely different way.
Okay.
So, like I'm writing, one of the ideas I have is writing a story that takes place in like Kiev, and it's just like, I've never been to Russia or to Ukraine, and I know nothing about it, but this particular story I feel like it needs to take place out in there. So I'm doing a lot of research, reading up a lot, trying to watch more Russian films, just to kind of get more of an idea. But like locations, I don't know. I think locations are important to keep in mind, but I'm not going to be self-funding this, so I'm just writing it as something that I can hopefully one day get a couple $1 million to go make.
Yeah.
For the wake, one of the things I'm doing is working with trying to build a bit of a collaborative group of people who want to write stories for an anthology that all kind of take place before the events of the pilot, and they all take place in the same city as the pilot. Kind of deal with the same issues of gentrification and kind of institutional racism and all the stuff that we want to cover there. What we want to do though is write those to locations that we know we can get, because we want to be able to get back to it if we decide in episode 5 that we should do a pickup shot that would be somebody else's point of view from an event from episode 1 or whatever. We want to know that we can get that location again. Whereas if I'm writing a pilot that I want to shop to like HBO or whatever, hopefully to get $1 million to go film, I'm not caring so much about like the specific location. I can imagine a location in my head rather than have to find a location right around it.
Right.
And then the other thing about writing this kind of anthology series that was really interesting, it's the first time in a long time that I can remember where I actually got really, really super excited to like sit down and write a storyboard, or like draw a storyboard or write like a shot list. Thinking in terms of shots as a director is something I don't do nearly as much. Like usually I'm a producer who happens to be directing. With the 48 hours, like it's nice to have a producing partner, but I can never fully take off my producer hat.
Right.
For my feature films, like I didn't have a monitor. Like you're not a director if you don't have a monitor. It's just
right.
It's just the way it goes. So I feel like I'm finally gotten to the point that I need to, I want to have a producing partner who's there to just like work with me from prep day 1 until shoot day, and then the moment shoot day happens, I'm just not a producer anymore. I'm not worried about is food going to be here. I'm not worried about if somebody's going to show up on time. Like that has to be on somebody else's shoulders, and I can just focus on my storyboards, my shot list, and get the show that I want to make.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting in that about location that made me think. What, like how much experience if you're writing something, say, for a specific location, like you mentioned Kiev, or say I've been working on a story that takes place in like a hotel in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Is it called the Florida Project?
No, but what is like how much do you have to like sort of experience, or how much, like when something has like a cultural influence, like your story has sort of like a certain cultural influence to it, or based on location, something like that, like how much of it how important is it for you to sort of experience that firsthand, or when is it the right time to experience that firsthand, like in terms of like when you're writing a story based around that? Like is it important, or does it depend on each different?
I don't think it's that important.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that if it's so this particular story, I've sort of put it on the back burner. I've never had a shortage of like story ideas, and I kind of get really excited about different things at different times. But this one I really want to do, one, because I'd love to go to Ukraine.
Okay.
It'd be a fun like holiday or working holiday. So that was one idea behind it. And then the other one is it's a story about a guy and his Ukrainian fiance who are going to visit her family for Christmas. And the idea is that he speaks English. English is her second language. He doesn't speak Russian. Her cousins and her really big extended family, like there's 1 or 2 English speakers there, but the rest of it is just him listening to people talking in Russian with no subtitles. and he's got like this translator app that breaks and his phone breaks, whatever. Then it turns into this like Straw Dogs kind of assault film, and he has no fucking clue what's happening, and everybody else who speaks English gets killed, and so he's just in the middle of this like Hatfield McCoy Straw Dogs situation, and he's on the other side of the world, and I'm just like, oh, that'd be a really fun film to do.
Yeah.
And so I've studied a bit in terms of like terrain and geography, and where I'd like to set it, and like some remote like hunting cabin. But like other than that, I don't think I need to do a ton. Like I'm not. It doesn't need to be like authenticity is great, but like, and I'd love to hire just like Russian actors who maybe they speak English, maybe they don't. Like,
right?
Are they good actors locally? But when you're writing the script, I think that you need to write what excites you, and if it excites you to like bog down in details, then great, that's good. I like to think of that as a rewrite issue. I would think that it would be important for me to scout sometime after we get the funding, but before we start shooting, we should go there and like start actually prepping, and then do another rewrite on the script once you kind of understand your locations a bit better, or the talent that you're working with, or whatever else. So there's always going to be something that inspires you while you're on a location that you didn't think about when you're sitting in your room writing. So I think seeing a location and feeling the environment and like smelling the air, like that's going to change your script in some way. It would be impossible not to, I think.
Yeah. And I think you kind of touched on it a little bit before, but have you ever had like how much does like being at a location influence like a story for you? Like how, like if you've visited like
all the time. I love so one thing, when I left London, which is probably 5 years now, which is just absolutely insane, I'd had this idea for a lighthouse thriller thing, and this year obviously with the lighthouse come out, it's kind of topical, but the idea was that it starts out as kind of like a Dark Knight-y kind of heist at the beginning, and it's this foggy day in like somewhere in Scotland, and this like group of people they're robbing something, like whether it's a jewelry store or a bank or whatever, and they run out, and it's foggy. They get on this boat. All they want to do is pilot this boat to the other side of a bay where a guy is waiting in a van, and they hop in the van, they drive off, and that's their heist. But it's foggy, somebody gets shot, maybe they get kidnapped, somebody, and the boat goes off course, and they get lost for days on end, and then they end up at this lighthouse, and then it turns into like a Lord of the Flies thing.
Yeah.
And so like that's the concept, is like 2/3 of the movie is just these people divided into different groups and trying to survive on this like outcropping. So the idea is great, but then I mean, whether or not you think it's great or not, but like in my head it's like, oh, this is a really good concept for a film. Didn't go anywhere with it. I didn't really bog down it, or like I didn't like settle in and read books on lighthouses or anything like that. But I did visit my sister-in-law up in this tiny remote island called Fair Isle up in Scotland. It's like 25 miles from the nearest body of other landmass. We got fogged in for like 4 days. Like our flight back to America was on Thursday. We were supposed to leave this island on Friday, but we didn't get off the island until Tuesday. So like we almost missed our flight back to America because the fog just rolled in, wouldn't leave.
Yeah.
And you go to the north side of the island, there's this amazing lighthouse that just has this spectacular view, and it's super creepy because you can't see 10 feet in front of your face.
Wow.
But you can hear these birds all around you that are in like these caves and the cliffs. And I'm like, within like the 4 days that we were fogged in there, I was every day just pounding out story notes for this lighthouse thing. So now I know exactly how I want to film it. And I did learn like we couldn't get a flight off the island, so I had to take this little like this boat over really choppy like North Seas water for like 4 hours, and got seasick. And I'm like, all right, I don't know if I want to write this script now. Like I don't know if I could film anything on a boat. But yeah, I think being at a location is very helpful, but it's not everything. So if that's a long way of answering that question.
Yeah, no, definitely. And kind of on the flip side of that thing, I see on like social media a lot, you post like movies that you're watching and stuff like that.
It's only because I have a terrible memory. And, every once in a while I go like, oh, what was that movie I loved? And I can at least turn to my Instagram. Like, oh yeah, that was it.
How much of like what you consume, like other media that you consume, it also like as opposed to like real world experiences, how much does that influence like what you do or your
I feel
process?
pretty fairly easy to influence. Usually, like when I was living in LA, my roommates just were all film people and we were watching movies all the time.
Right.
And there's a library right next to my house that we can go and get 10 movies at a time. So we just like when we're not working, we grab a movie, watch a movie a day or 2 movies a day, and I would try to like lump certain types of movies together if I want to get in the right frame of mind to make like Hurricane Emma. I was just watching a ton of like mumblecore films and no budget like art house things. And the concept for Hurricane Emma from like my directorial I guess stance in it is like, what if Michael Haneke was directing a mumblecore film? And so I would watch a lot of Michael Haneke films and I watch a lot of mumblecore films, and then I just jumped into it. And like, so I think it's important to be influenced. Generally speaking, I think it's a good idea to watch a lot of movies from a lot of different genres and try to be open-minded about things.
Like, is there a certain approach, like certain individuals that really like, or movies that really speak to you, or that you continuously reference when you do certain projects?
I don't think there is. I don't think there's any like one particular film, but whenever I'm making a movie, I try to keep in mind the movies that would be similar that were successful. There's certain filmmakers that I never stop talking about, like Michael Haneke's one of them. He's an Austrian. He won an Oscar for White Ribbon a couple years ago, and very, very, very bleak films. I'm a big fan of watching them, but I don't watch him very often because I have to be in the right mind frame.
Right.
I'm a huge Jim Jarmusch fan. He's just a filmmaker that I feel like our sensibilities and our sense of humor are very similar. Yorgos Lanthimos, I think if I pronounce his name right. He did Dogtooth was my first one, and it was phenomenal. But he did The Favorite, which was really good. Came out a couple years ago. The Lobster. So there's certain filmmakers that I love, and there's certain actors that I really, whenever they do something, I'd like to go out and see it. I was about to say Joaquin Phoenix. I didn't see The Joker, but absolutely loved You Were Never Really Here, which was my favorite movie of the year before. And it seems like it's a very similar character to The Joker. I like to be influenced. With The Wake, one thing that I'm cognizant, I can't even speak tonight. One thing I'm aware of is that people are going to read it or hear me pitch it, or they're going to watch it and go, oh, he's ripping off The Wire. And I deliberately didn't watch The Wire for about 6 years until I'm done with my pilot. I'm like, I'm not going to watch it. Everybody's telling me I have to watch The Wire, so I won't watch The Wire until I'm done with the pilot.
Okay.
And then I finished the pilot, and so what we did immediately after that was to watch all 5 seasons. And I'm like, motherfucker stole all my ideas. Like, the themes of it are identical. The title is very similar. Like, everything about it is just the same. And I'm like, I'm going to push forward with it, knowing that people are going to say, I ripped out The Wire.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what? I feel like it's a good concept. I feel like I nailed it. And it's a shame that somebody nailed it 20 years before I did. And the thumbing, or the Hitchhiker script that I wrote, like, I remember I was in a screenwriting class and somebody read it and they're like, oh, you just ripped off On the Road. And like, On the Road is probably a book that I would love to read, but now 20 years later I still haven't touched it because I haven't made it. So like, that's just kind of my personality. Is like, I understand, I love being influenced. I don't want to be in a position where somebody said I ripped off something.
Yeah.
Like, I think those are 2 totally different things. But what can you do? Like, everything's been made. You just kind of have to filter stories through your own lens,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, everything, like, there's not really many original ideas anymore.
I don't worry at all about originality.
Okay.
I do worry about voice, though. I think those are 2 totally different things. So I think originality is a myth, and I think voice is what makes you you. So if you gave the same script to 10 different filmmakers, they're going to be 10 different movies.
Right.
And so, like, have your voice and learn who you are and what you want to do, and that'll inform the decisions that you make while you're making your movie.
Okay, cool. How does like different media outside of movies like do they influence you in different ways that say other movies would?
Probably. I mean, I know Pittsburgh's got a thriving like theater district, but I don't go to plays very often. I love music. I like building playlists for movies, but I don't build playlists for writing scripts. I know a lot of people like to write to music.
Yeah.
Whereas what I do is when I'm working on my house or I'm painting a room or, whatever, I'm driving around, I'll compile, like I'll put songs into different playlists for potential use in these films.
Okay.
But I don't write scripts to music or anything like that.
Okay. We worked on a project, what was it, about 3 years ago now? Probably, I think. It was around 17. What was your role in that?
I don't even remember. Yeah, that was so long ago. I feel like I was an AD on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd kind of stepped away from film work for a while I was trying to finish off my film. So I wasn't being hired out to go work on films for a while. But yeah, that was when I first kind of moved to Pittsburgh, maybe like a year within the first year of me living here.
Okay.
It was really nice to meet a lot of crew members, but I think my job on that was AD, which is something I really like.
Yeah.
But the parameters have to be right with that. I think that AD work is so stressful that if you don't if there's a good producer and the director has the experience and like understands what an AD needs to know, like, do you have a shot list? Can you sit down? Can you actually sit and write a shot list? Then I'll be willing to do AD work. But if it's just a director and the AD is expected to be a producer as well and everything else, then I'm not a big fan.
Yeah. How'd you end up, I don't remember if you mentioned, how'd you end up in Pittsburgh?
Big fan of shitty weather and crappy public transportation. I grew up in Utah. I moved down to California, not necessarily for any reason other than to get out of Utah.
Yeah.
Always knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, but never really had any interest in going to LA. But my buddy from college grew up in a town called Barstow, and he's just like, fuck it, let's go. And so we packed up our vehicles and drove to LA. From there, I kind of like bummed around the country for a bit. I traveled a lot, like lived out of my van, hopped on Greyhound buses. So I knew Pittsburgh because my best friend from high school went to University of Pittsburgh out here. And so I kind of had my quarter-life crisis on his couch in Oakland, and, just drank a bunch of Yingling and, just spent 3 months here and finally did a bunch of, like, medical studies to make some money so that I can go back to California. So I can afford it. And then, at some point I finally got fed up enough of LA to leave, and I moved to Salt Lake for a bit, near where I grew up, hung out with family for a year. And then moved up to Portland. At that point, I thought I was going to live in Portland forever. But my girlfriend at the time, she was British. We got really, really fed up of seeing each other like twice a year. And we're like, we should probably get married so we can hang out a little bit and see if we wanted to stay married.
Yeah.
And so we were going to stay and get married in Portland. But then she got accepted to a university up in Scotland and asked me if I wanted to move up there. So I kind of just packed up and went.
Oh, wow.
Lived in Scotland for a year, lived in London for about 4, and then wanted to get some sunshine, moved back to LA for a bit. And then by then, we're like, all right, and sorry again, roundabout story, but you're going to get it. So we landed in LA and spent about 8 months there. And we were going to move up to Portland, but it was just way too expensive at that point. Like, it just exploded.
Yeah.
So at that point, we pulled out a big map of the U.S. We kind of crossed off from the Mason-Dixon line, and I said, I just can't live the swampy heat of the South and in the desert. Like, it's not my thing. And then we kept looking up, like, top 10 whatever cities and top 10 beer cities or top 10, like, whatever. And Pittsburgh was always in these top 10 lists. And we're like, I know Pittsburgh a little bit. Like, let's go check it out. And then we came out here for a week. We found a house we liked, and we decided to move out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were actually just like doing process of elimination.
a lot of it. And yeah, what can we afford? We wanted to be East Coast, so it'd be easier to kind of fly back and forth to the UK.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it. Like, if it was up to me, we would have stayed. If it was up to me, I would have gone to Portland instead of LA when I graduated high school.
Yeah.
Like, if I can make any change in my life, that would be it.
Right.
And then, Cascadia would be great. That's kind of like Northern California, that area up Vancouver. Like, I love Pacific Northwest, but it's just kind of too expensive and too far away. Like, it's a hell of a flight to go back to England. And then New York's too expensive, Boston's too expensive. But then Pittsburgh is it's a nice little town. Like, it's got everything you need. It's got terrible traffic, but the cost of living is great. And it feels like a big city at times, and it feels like a small town at times, depending on where and when you are.
That's true. You kind of get the best of all the worlds, like, combined into one.
Yeah, like I say, there's so many $1 million views out here as well. It's great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's just like, it seems like it's a good mixture of culture as well. So you're kind of just getting a little bit of everything in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems to be changing quite a bit as well, like demographics and things. And, it's great that there's so many young people here who are going to college, and now they're actually able to stay. Whereas before it seemed like people would graduate, but there wasn't industry here. And
That's
I didn't
true.
move here for the film industry, but it turns out it's vibrant. Like, like last year in particular, it was just nonstop all year. I think I got out of my job at a good time and fell in with a crew that was constantly working. We'll see how it goes this year. If they can get some tax write-offs and get some more big productions in, would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a kind of a moving, always these moving parts in there, and you just like a lot of ambiguity with it from the way it sounds, but it also depends on, at least from my experience and the people that I know, like who and what groups you get into.
Exactly. Yeah, I think just like in LA, just like anywhere else, like if you're not available for one project, you can be replaced pretty quickly. I feel like that happened a bit on my last thing because I was off doing something else, but it's a small town. If you're not a dick and you work hard, like you're gonna be in high demand at some point. But very few people around here are year-round full-time film people.
Right.
They do exist, but it has its ebbs and flows, and it's one of the, like, I don't like freelance at all. I love working on films. I would do pro bono work and work for free if I could all the time, just like find people you want to work with and do it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we all have to pay bills and things, and one thing that Pittsburgh has over like LA is the bills are a lot cheaper, rent's a lot cheaper.
Right.
So that's one thing, it gives you a bit more flexibility and freedom in terms of what projects you take on.
Yeah. Yeah. I started off, I was doing a lot of freelance stuff, but then it just like became like it was too much time for, like, I didn't want to dedicate all that time to, like, doing that kind of job. And then also it was just like I wasn't getting to where I wanted to be with it. So, but I still like to do it like as more or less like a hobby, but I'll do things here and there, and it's it's enjoyable for me now that I just like I found like sort of like the right place where I feel like I'm not stressed out or overworked with it, but I'm still like I still get to enjoy it as a passion.
That's good. Yeah, I find that when I was in LA and I was working all the time, there's no time to write, there's no time to like enjoy yourself or watch movies or whatever. Especially as a production designer on no budget films. Right. I was working like 24-hour. Like I couldn't tell you how many 24-hour shifts I've pulled. The longest day I've ever worked was 46 hours. And so I'm just like, I'm burnt out. I'm over it. I hate this whole industry.
Yeah.
But then when I lived in London, I was too tired. Like every time I moved to a new city, you start from the ground up, and about 6 months later, people asked me to produce, and it just kind of kept doing that until I got to London. Then it's just too expensive. You can't. You can't leave your apartment without like throwing 50 quid out, and
right.
It's just, you can't really do it as a hobby, or I was very unsuccessful doing it as a hobby. But I did find a job I liked with people I liked, and hours that worked for me, and I was able to wake up an hour earlier and just do an hour of dedicated writing every day, which I had never done before up until that point.
Yeah.
And then when I got home, I hung out with my wife for a little bit, had dinner, we'd watch a show or whatever, and then before bed, I'd spend an hour to 2 hours being a producer, emails and, whatever else I needed to do, buying equipment. And that worked. That worked pretty well. I created a little crew that I liked, that we were all storytellers, but I was the producer, like the actual production guy. And then one of my buddies he's a writer and he writes commercials, so he's really good at writing short content and doing it quick and high quality. And then my other buddy was a visual effects guy. He works on Star Wars and all these, big ass films that go through London. So the three of us just kind of teamed up and we said, all of us are storytellers. Each of us have an area that we focus on and that we're really good at. Let's just kind of meet up once a week, have some beers, come up with some short films and start kicking them out. And we did one that I think it's on my website. It's not great. It's called The Process, and it's funny. It's just a little thing that we shot in about 6 hours in an office. It looks really good. But it was the icebreaker for us. It's we need to just do a broad comedy that we can all just not be too passionate about, but let's go and see how we work together.
Yeah.
And then the next one we were going to do was going to be great, and we loved it. We're all very excited for it, but we had to build this special set for it, and that's when my wife's visa came through, and it's all of a sudden it's just sorry guys, I'm leaving. And luckily that film ended up getting made. It's called Benefits. You can see it. It was made by Channel 4, which is one of the big networks in the UK.
Oh yeah.
So it's on the website. It's, they kind of did this short, 4 or 5 minute version, whereas our script I think was 8 or 9 pages. And they did a really good job. This guy Edward Lomas was supposed to be our DP, and then after I moved to the UK or moved back to the US, he emailed me. He's like, I kind of want to still make this. Do you mind if I direct it and pitch it around? And he ended up getting funding, and it's it's good. It's really kind of Black Mirror-y, which I like.
Oh, so, cool.
Yeah, check it out.
Very cool. Any other projects you want to kind of promote that we didn't really get to?
Man, no, not really. Nothing that's. I'm still trying to get this anthology thing off the ground. Trying to just meet other filmmakers who are interested in these kind of projects, and hopefully, hopefully I can start finding the time to shop this pilot around and see what happens. So,
what do you? What do you see beyond that? Did you have any ideas on plans or?
I try not to make plans anymore. So I'm a feature films guy.
Yeah.
And feature films are dying, and I'm an indie guy, and indie films are dying. So it's one of those things that I'll still make movies even if there's no audience for it, because I'm compelled to be a filmmaker. I don't do it because I like it anymore. I do it because I'm a filmmaker, and it's just kind of the way my brain works. If you give me 5 minutes alone, I'm thinking about writing a story and how I'm going to film it. So saying that, if I don't go anywhere with this pilot, I'm going to be writing something else, or I'll find another opportunity to get out and film stuff. So,
how do you think things will change for you if the industry makes another big change in technology or the way that we sort of see movies or consume movies?
I couldn't tell you. It depends on the change, but the changes are happening.
Right.
I think last thing I read a while ago, 6 months or so ago, was that the video game industry is just so much bigger than the film industry. And I'm like,
yeah.
I'm not a video game guy. I've got ideas for things that could be fun to do, but I don't know the first thing about writing for video games. But I'm sure that that's a change that I can make. So maybe that's where it's going, or, I'm not sure what other technology is out there that is going to replace film. But I feel like with streaming services, one thing I do like, I'm not all down on technology. I do love that series don't have to be my wife's never watched Lost, and we're getting into it now. She knows how much I enjoyed it. She bought me the big box set for my birthday, and I'm like, all right, well, you have to watch a pilot with me. And she's like, okay, great, we'll sit down and just watch a pilot. And now, a month later, we've just finished we're halfway through season 3.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to, I'm giddy about where it's going, but trying not to spoil it for her. But I would hate to write Lost, because it was 24 hours of network television for an unknown amount of time. But one thing that streaming services have done that I really, really love is that it's shortened. You can now do a miniseries. You couldn't do a miniseries 10 years ago. Like, they just did not exist. Whereas now, like, if you come up with an 8-hour story, pitch it, Netflix will give you $1 million to go make if you've got the in to have that. Like, they're just fucking throwing money out like hand over foot, but you still have to get in the door somehow. So make your movie, make it to the best of your ability, make it true to your voice, get it out there, and then hope that using that will get some doors open for you. And then you can have pitch meetings and just have a whole bunch of like projects in your back pocket, have scripts written, have concepts written, just have them available for when you do get those meetings.
Right. It's interesting how like creative media has, like, as it progresses, it's gotten easier to sort of find outlets, but at the same time, like, the advances in technology could also, in certain ways, and maybe this is just my thinking, like, make things harder for someone who is sort of ingrained into that process and you know, their workflow and all that. And
I mean, I couldn't tell you the first thing about like how to make branded content for Instagram or whatever. Like, people are making tons of money doing that, and I'm like, I couldn't tell you how. There's people with great YouTube channels. There's people with terrible YouTube channels, but they have 1 million followers, and each video has like 20 million views, and so they're obviously making money doing what they're doing. Terrible like production value, or like content's not really interesting, or the personalities aren't great, and yet they're doing it and they're finding success in it. And it's not to say that I couldn't figure out how to do it. I just, the amount of time and effort that it would take to kind of reset what I'm doing and do something, like approach it from another point of view. I'm like, it doesn't sound fun to me, and I'm to the point in my life that I'm like, I just want to kind of have this creative release, and I'd like to enjoy doing it. I don't want to feel like I'm, you know, I don't know, I feel like an old dog trying to learn a new trick.
You're like trying to keep up with the way things are, or the way things, you know, are becoming.
And I just don't follow like trends. And another thing is, like, I don't chase camera technology. Like, that's I know a lot of filmmakers who the very first question, like, I worked at Sundance for a couple of years, and I've worked at a bunch of different film festivals. And one of the things that always made me cringe was when we just got done watching this like film that somebody poured their soul into. It took them 2.5 years or whatever from the time of conception to the time that we're sitting here in this room. And they open it up to the audience for questions, and the very first question is, what camera did you shoot it on? And it's just like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, the camera is just one instrument out of a million, and it's just, yes, it's important, but it's like, it shouldn't be the first question you watch after like seeing a premiere of somebody's movie.
You know, I completely agree with that. Like, when people just like want, you know, you to shoot something just based on like what you're using or something like that, that just like drives me up a wall, because it's like, that shouldn't matter.
Well, I remember when Red camera came out, it's probably 2005, 2007, something like that, and people were like bending over backwards to try to film on it, and I didn't really get it for some of the projects that we were doing. Like, why are we filming on this? And then it turns out most of it was just to have some snazzy looking footage put on a demo reel, and I didn't really understand the value of a demo reel that looked great for a long time. And then, like I said earlier, like, it was really tough for me to kind of come up with a concept to make one. Like, if I had one while I was living in London that was halfway decent, I had opportunities to get hired as a director. But I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck to do with it. Like, I don't know how to make my movies into a demo reel. So there's definitely lost opportunities there. So I get it. If you want to get the coolest new technology in order to make this amazing looking thing, in order to sell yourself as a director, like, I get that. But that doesn't interest me as a producer at all. Like, I don't understand, you know, and from a story perspective, like, are you telling a story, or are you just going out and getting cool shots? And again, like, if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
Because like you said, that's only like one part of it. Like, it's, you know, there are many components to it that sort of bring it together. So it's like, it all shouldn't be focused on, you know, one piece of technology. Or
do focus on sound.
Well, sound is always important.
But
that is true.
You know, but that's it. Like, I think that as long as it's in focus and people can hear what you want them to hear, then you know, everything else should work its way out.
I actually was re-editing like a compilation of some of my older podcasts, and one of the things we talked about, like when we were making Body Farm, was like how like when we started out, we didn't really have a sound guy. We were just kind of winging it, and I went to like the producer on the film, and I was just like, listen, you need to get like a legit sound guy for this, because this is like really important.
Yeah,
like
you're gonna fuck shit up.
You can't just like fart around on it and hope
people will squint at the screen and try to figure out what visuals you like. Watch The Lighthouse. Like, it's amazing cinematography, but it's sometimes really hard to watch. But that's by design. Or like Blair Witch, like they just took what they had available and they made it work. And also that was, they knew what their capacity was, and they went out and had fun with it. But it has to sound good. Like, it can't.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to sound super crisp and clean all the time. Just make sure you've got a competent sound person. Like, put money into that.
Yeah, absolutely. As we just kind of like wind this down, where can people find more about you? I believe you mentioned your website. Just what was that again?
The website is Alex Cassun at alexcassunfilms.com.
Okay.
And then Indieground Films is my production company. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook. We were on Twitter, but we've been hacked. I've been spending 3 weeks trying to get Twitter to reset my password. And I finally got an email yesterday saying, "We're sorry, you might want to just start a new account." I'm figuring out if I want to go back to Twitter or not. But yeah, that's basically Indieground Films. And, I rent out props and set dressing and costumes and tents and generators and shit. So if you need anything, give me a call.
Cool.
You can find my contact info on my website at the end of my demo reel as well. So.
Cool. Anything else you want to kind of throw out there before we wrap this up?
No, not really. I think we talked a pretty good show here. That was
awesome. Yeah,
a
definitely.
lot of stuff. So yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for stopping by.
Cool. Thank you.